Good morning, everyone. I'm James Hackney, Dean of Northeastern Law School. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Reunion and Alumni Weekend. We had a great event last night, and I'm looking forward to today. This weekend is always a highlight of the year for our law school community, catching up with our graduates, sharing news about the school, and engaging in thoughtful discussions about current events, hot legal topics, and the extraordinary careers and professional passions of our graduates. Before we get to this morning's program, I have great news to share with you about your law school. First, a bit about our impressive first-year class, who are embracing the 1L year through a combination of Zoom and in-person classes. The class of 2023 boasts the strongest academic profile in the school's history, with a median LSAT of 162, a median GPA of 3.65. In terms of diversity, the class is 73% women, 37% identify as people of color, and 20% identify as members of the LGBTQ community. The average age is 25, with students in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. While many have ties to Massachusetts, as a group, they represent 38 of the 50 states and the District of Columbia. While these numbers are impressive, the school was drawn to this diverse class based on a wide variety of life experiences and passion for using the law to promote justice as future lawyers. And I can personally attest to their inquisitive natures and keen minds since I'm teaching torts this fall. They are smart and insightful and good-humored, and a pleasure to have in class. Next, I am pleased to share the most recent national recognition of our program that comes in the form of A+ rankings in health law and human rights by the National Jurists. The jurists also recently gave us an A in intellectual property, not to mention ranking us #1 for practical training for the 6th time in a row. US News and World Report also ranks us #11 in healthcare law. All of these accolades speak to the strength of our faculty and staff, innovators, thought leaders, and superb teachers. While all of this external validation of our leadership in key areas definitely makes us feel good, it is our success with staying true to our beliefs and providing our students with the best legal education in the nation that is the source of our strength. Over the past few months, in the wake of COVID, our faculty and staff have provided our students with the same high quality and personalized legal education that you all experience in the classroom and in your co-ops. And our students have been stellar. They have embraced hybrid courses, settled into remote co-ops with enthusiasm and tenacity, and are volunteering to help those who are unemployed and those who are victims of domestic violence, among many others. On a daily basis, I reflect on how these future lawyers are already nimble, creative thinkers and the leaders society needs as we move forward. And of course, our community has been long deeply involved in the discourse and protest against systemic racism. Racism is the burning issue of our time. Its impact is psychologically and physically traumatic, both at the individual and collective levels. And as we have seen far too many times, it can be lethal. Over the past few months, we have held community meetings and created task forces. Faculty have provided expertise to the national media and our students. Also, faculty and staff have been on the front lines of the Black Lives Matter movement, along with many of you, our graduates. Together, we must embrace the long, hard path ahead of us. Truth, justice, and equity will not come easily. Rather, they will come through often painful conversations, systemic changes, and a commitment to revisioning what justice can and should look like for all people in this country. I know the Northeastern Law faculty, staff, graduates, and students will continue to be at the forefront of creating the change we need as we move forward. There are so many highlights and stories I could share. If you haven't already read the latest copy of our magazine, I encourage you to read a copy you have on hand or can find in our website. We'll also include it in the chat. There's so much good news to share, so many inspiring stories about how our students and you, our graduates, are persevering through the pandemic with grit and unwavering commitment to ensuring that justice is served. Now, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Massachusetts Senate President Karen Spilka, class of 1980. President Spilka represents the Metro West communities of Ashland, Framingham, Franklin, Holliston, Hopkinton, Medway, and Natick. Prior to being voted in as president by her Senate colleagues in 2018, she served as chair of the Massachusetts Senate Committee on Ways and Means, as Senate Majority Whip, Assistant Majority Whip, chair of the Joint Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies, and chair of the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities, a committee she helped create. She began her legislative career as a state representative for the 7th Middlesex District in 2001. Prior to becoming a legislator, President Spilka was in private practice as an arbitrator and mediator, specializing in labor and employment law and community and court mediation. She also previously worked as a labor and employment attorney on behalf of employees, unions, and the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority and the Commonwealth. In addition to her law degree, President Spilka holds a BS in social work from Cornell University. I turn it over to President Spilka and Miel Marquis for a conversation.
Thank you, Dean Hackney. Thank you for those kind words, and thank you for so ably leading Northeastern's law school. You're doing a terrific job, and we all thank you and warmly applaud you as well. It's so wonderful to be with all of you today, even if it is virtually. Good morning to everybody. I'd like to thank Miel and the Northeastern Law School team that has gotten this together. It's a lot of work behind the scenes, but you've done a great job despite very trying times. It's a big challenge, and thank you. Northeastern University Law School was an important step in my journey to becoming Senate President. I never planned on this. I never originally even planned on becoming a legislator. I try to give back with co-op internships to students throughout my State House career. But it wasn't the only thing that influenced me on the way to becoming a legislator. Politics simply is about people. And there's a long list of people who have made me the person and the legislator that I am today. My Jewish grandfather escaped political and religious persecution in Russia. One morning in 1906, he woke up and looked out and saw his best friend hanging in their little town square. And his father knew that his son, my grandfather, would be next. So that very day, he packed up a few belongings, said goodbye to those that he loved, and left behind everybody and everything that he knew. And he made his way to America for a new life. And America, when he came on the boat, saw the Statue of Liberty, America welcomed him with open arms. And years later, many of his family came over as well. His story is my story, and it has shaped my views on immigration in our country. That a generous immigration policy saves lives and fulfills the highest ideals of what our country stands for. If not for this, I literally would not be here today. My mother was a social worker, and she inspired me to become a social worker early on in my career and dedicate my life to helping others. My father fought in World War II, and like so many other World War II veterans, he suffered from undiagnosed mental illness. Then it was called shell shock. Now it's generally referred to as PTSD. And he suffered in the years, especially coming home. As a teenager, I could see the results of that trauma and how much he was struggling. And I often wondered what his life, as well as mine and my family's, would have been like if he had received the services and help that he needed. His story taught me how vital the need is for comprehensive veteran services, how important it is, how so critically important it is to instill resiliency in children who grow up in difficult situations. And most kids have some sort of difficult situation. How great the need is to eliminate the stigma around mental illness, and how important it is to achieve mental health parity, to treat mental health and physical health the same here in Massachusetts. I'm very proud to say that this year the Senate passed a very strong, comprehensive mental health care reform bill, and we created a $10 million trust fund in the state budget for mental and behavioral health initiatives. Part of that funding has been put towards a public awareness campaign I helped develop. My goal was to develop something and do a public awareness campaign every year. This year, it's called More to the Story, which I'm hoping you will see on social media and on TV soon, which seeks to encourage conversations about mental health and finally work to eliminate the stigma around seeking mental health care. My story is also intertwined with that of my sister, Susie, who was born with Down syndrome. I spent 26 years as her legal guardian, and through our close relationship, she both helped to ground me often and inspire me. She taught me how much our lives and communities are enriched when we include people of all abilities and all strengths. I got my paycheck. That was her rallying cry once a week. She was so proud of getting a paycheck, which also taught me that giving people the opportunity to participate in our economy, as well as the tools to succeed, benefits us all. In my own story, I can point to one policy decision that had far-reaching consequences in my life: the creation of the formula which determines the funding for our state's public schools. As a young Metro West mom back in the 1990s, I was happily running my own business as a labor and employment lawyer, specializing, as you heard, in arbitration, mediation. And my husband, Joel, was also running his own small environmental engineering business. And we were enjoying our lives in Ashland with our 2 young boys. Frustration over some school issues and some of the school funding especially, however, led me to make choices. I ran for school committee and started working on changing the education funding formula. As a school committee member, I invited people from organizations and folks across the state using my conflict resolution background, and I organized what I called, and we called at the time, the Chapter 70 Roundtable Coalition, to collaborate on and build consensus for education funding reform. The possibility of making real change in the lives of my sons and the lives of other children across our entire state really inspired me. And so when the state representative seat opened up in my district, I knew that very day I would run, not something I had given a whole lot of thought about previously. I announced that day I was running. That was almost 20 years ago. It blows me away. It blows me away that the decades have passed since being at Northeastern. But during these last 20 years, I became state senator and more recently Senate president. And I'm really also proud to say that my first term as Senate president, the legislature passed the Student Opportunity Act, which is now law, and it will invest over $1 billion to make our schools more equitable over the next decade, and hopefully achieve our goal of finally getting rid of that persistent achievement gap which has existed in Massachusetts, so all children will get a high quality education. As a legislator, I feel like I pull all of these skills that I have developed over the years as a social worker, a lawyer, an arbitrator, mediator, a small business owner, and as the granddaughter of immigrants, the daughter of a veteran, a wife, mother, sister. And it's been an incredibly rewarding career for me. And I'm really proud that the Senate has tackled important issues such as education, healthcare reform, transportation, mental health reform, major climate change, and racial justice. That was something that was really important this year, all while adopting and pivoting to help residents deal with the public health crisis and the economic fallout of COVID-19. We moved quickly to make changes to our unemployment system to help those affected by the virus. We provided funding for the pandemic response and helping small businesses. We updated our laws to allow flexibility in a number of industries, including restaurants. I hope you're all eating at restaurants and supporting them. They're the foundation of our small businesses right now. The Senate's focus has been on helping our communities, including municipalities, residents, families, and small businesses throughout this entire pandemic. And we have remained in session to do so for the first time in the history of the Senate until January. It remains to be seen what 2021 will bring us. We don't know, but I will rely on my Senate colleagues and from hearing from people like you across the state. All of you help shape our agenda for the upcoming session. so that we will stay true, and I will stay true as to why I got into this business to begin with. And that is simply helping people. In a lot of ways, I feel like I continue to do social work across the state. So I'm happy and I look forward to discuss aspects of policy with Miel and all of you in the remaining time. But I thought it was important to let you know who I am and how I approach decision-making and policy development. Law school is such a formative time for all of us, and I have never forgotten the values and the lessons that I learned at Northeastern. So I'm happy, really happy to be here celebrating with all of you. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you, Karen. Madam President, which I'm going to call you henceforth because it's really fun to say, and I'm dreaming big with those words for some point in our nation. But that was terrific to hear. I learned a little bit about you and your grandfather and how you approach things and your background. I had heard a little bit about your work as a school committee person in the past, but it's amazing how some of those first committees can really shape you for politics and give you an idea of what's to come. But you've led an amazing life. You've done all kinds of interesting things already, and we're looking forward to seeing what else will take place going forward. I have a series of questions for you, which I'm looking forward to, and I'm hoping lots of people will be interested in hearing the questions that we picked. Thank you for always being supportive of Northeastern and the law school. You've come back for me multiple times. You've done Women in the Law for me, spoken there. You did a panel on women in public service that was fantastic a few years ago. I think that was organized by Professor Peter Emrich and myself. So appreciate all of your support over the years, and I'm ready to dive in if you are. You look great there, surrounded by your plants and your lovely green thumb. So here we go. You touched on this a tiny bit, but tell me some of your favorite memories of law school.
I look back actually very fondly at my time at law school, and I don't know if many other students outside of Northeastern law feel that way. When I mention that to other lawyers and I say I enjoyed law school, it's hard for them to believe. But you know, I guess it's been a while, but what I do remember is when I worked really hard and took it very seriously. So when I worked hard, and when I played hard.
That's good. That's what you have to do, right? When you get a break, use it. Do you remember whom your favorite professors were, and can you tell me why?
Well, there were a lot of really great professors, I have to say. I felt very stimulated and interested in almost all my classes. But clearly, I ended up going into labor and employment law. I think a good number of my colleagues and my classmates did as well. And so I have to say, I still remember sitting through Professor Tom Campbell's labor classes, Professor Carl Clare's labor classes. I still have an outline of the final exam for one of Carl Clare's classes with a flow chart and everything. I still kept it.
Do you refer to it for particular?
Sometimes.
Senate cases or anything? No, but you kept it.
Very little teeny handwriting to get everything on one big page. I remember that. It was this great flow chart about labor rights and where they stem from. But the fact that this is 40 years later, I still remember this, and I still remember some classes, and I loved labor and employment law. I still do, so.
That's great. We talked about this a little bit in your intro, your opening remarks, but is there a skill set that you think you learned in law school that you bring to your day-to-day work now?
Yes, definitely. Clearly, they roll into from other experiences, but build upon them as well. So I would say clearly hard work is something that has really stuck with me. Persistence, that is a big benefit. Being a legislator, especially, it can take a long time to get something through the legislative process. And you don't always see results right away, so you have to keep at it. The ability and the desire to study all the issues and all of the aspects, the legal analysis that goes on into issues, clearly trying to anticipate different perspectives and being able to respond and argue and persuade from the different perspectives as I try to get my bills and priorities, both as a regular senator and now as Senate president, trying to anticipate what my other colleagues will, their positions. So I have information and being able to respond to that, or the House or the governor, so being able to be open to looking at all sides and understanding all perspectives.
Terrific. And you did touch on this, but we do have a really collaborative law school. I think that's what makes us so unique and special. People are really willing to help each other and collaborate and want to, and the in-school, out-of-school nature of it makes for great collaboration as well, and bringing all that you learn out in the workforce back to the school. That leads me to my next question, which is, as the leader of the Massachusetts Senate, how do you reach consensus with your members and with your House counterparts? What are some of the biggest keys to your successful leadership of our state? We're seeing that, I think, in our state much more than perhaps at the national level, but tell us, what are some of your keys to success there?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you with that, Miel. I believe both within the Senate and the legislature, working with the House and the governor and his administration, which everybody knows that the legislature is Democratic, the governor is Republican, but we all work really well together. I think that so much of it just boils down to basic respect and courtesy of others. And that foundation, I think, is something that I hopefully came with, as well as Northeastern, has helped build that foundation. But my style is to be inclusive, and there's a total, for those that may not know, particularly those that are in other states. I hope all of you in Massachusetts know there's 40 state senators, there's 160 state representatives, so there's a total of 200 legislators. So there's 39 other senators, and all Democrats have their committees. But I work with the minority leader, Bruce Tarr from Gloucester. I consider Bruce a friend. So, when I try to take the approach of no surprises and talking to him about issues, I empower the senators. They all come to the Senate like me, with a lot of background and experience and education and training and knowledge. So they bring all of that. I believe I would be crazy to not tap into all of that and have them also participate in the process. I did that as soon as COVID-19 hit. I formed a Senate formal working group that there were senators, and then there were subcommittees. And that was the basis of our response. They helped communicate from other senators and districts up to me, and I would share information with the speaker or the governor, and we would share information of what was going on and issues. So that's what drove our agenda. The final product, I believe, is always better when people are included. And I believe that my background in mediation and conflict resolution also helped. I mean, I used to train people in active listening and making sure people were able to respond to what were a person's true issues, not necessarily what they were saying their issue is, but what are their true issues and how to move them along in a positive, productive way. So I think all of that has helped me be a better legislator and truly a better Senate president, I hope.
Well, those are some great skills to bring to the table, in particular, your labor and employment background and all of those skills around that. We all need that skill set, and listening and figuring out what the true set of issues are as opposed to what the perhaps spoken issues are. It sort of leads me into my next question, which is, you may have heard the dean's comments on the percentage of female students, the percentage of female faculty. I mean, Northeastern has been way ahead of the gender curve since its inception. But you are a female trailblazer. It's sort of a weighty title, and it may be a lot to take in, but you really are. And I kind of want to know what your response to that is. And do you feel the weight of that at times? I don't know how many female Senate presidents there have been. Perhaps you're the first, perhaps you're not, but you've got to be one of just a few. So talk about that for a minute for me.
I absolutely feel the weight of it and the responsibility. I think strong female role models and mentors are very, very important. And we're making strides. And I, again, applaud Northeastern for the percentages of women and minorities. I think my graduating class also had more women than men in it. And I think it has really, really made a difference in the entire profession. Whatever area folks go into, having more women participate, just like having more minorities and others, makes the discussion richer, brings different perspectives, and raises issues, frankly, that may not have been raised if it was all male. You know, I see that clearly in the Senate. I see it in the State House. I am one of 17 women Senate presidents in the entire country right now, which I think is significant. I was the number 27th woman senator of all time in the Massachusetts Senate.
Oh.
Now, this figure blew me away when I first heard it, and I thought it was a mistake, but it's not. There, in the history of the Massachusetts legislature, and people should remember, the Massachusetts legislature is one of the oldest in the country. There have been 213 women legislators, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate. 213 women compared to over 20,000 men.
Wow.
Yeah. That is pretty amazing. So, you know, I think that women really do need to continue stepping up, and that's why when I was in the House, I started and it existed for a short period of time, a new women legislator mentoring program. When I became Senate president, I instituted a mentoring program for new legislators. I think it's one of the first in the country. You know, I have leadership meetings all the time with the governor and the speaker, clearly two males who have been in politics longer than I have. Labor law was a male-dominated field. It certainly is making changes. And it never bothered me, and most of the time I never noticed it. But again, I go back to having strong role models and mentors, and I'm proud that over the years I was the lead sponsor of some major bills like the Equal Pay Act that we recently passed, making Massachusetts the strongest in the nation with the state equal pay law. I was the lead sponsor of the paid family and medical leave bill. I first filed that in 2006. So talk about persistence. You need to just keep working at it. I also have been fighting to get more women on boards of directors in both private companies and public sector. And another bill that you wouldn't think you really needed to do, another one that comes to mind is getting through the legislature a bill preventing the shackling of women inmates during labor. That always, yes, that always shocked me because talk about having women's perspective. I can't imagine a woman in the middle of labor getting up and trying to escape. I mean, it is just so ridiculous a thought. And there was absolutely no reason to need to shackle them during labor or after, but that was happening, and it was happening here in Massachusetts. So those are issues that I think are important. The other thing I want to mention, and hopefully when COVID is more behind us, I invite the folks that are listening here this morning. When I became Senate President, the Senate President's suite in the State House is magnificent. And on the wall of my major office, my bigger office, it had all the pictures of all of the prior Senate presidents. Needless to say, practically, I'm the 95th Massachusetts Senate President. There were 93, 94 white males. And I'd sit in that room, and it always made me uncomfortable, I have to say, as a woman looking up and not seeing people that I could identify with. So we started a practice in the State House. We went through a lot of the history of a lot of women who have had an impact in Massachusetts. And I replaced all of those pictures with pictures of women.
Great.
And the only thing I said to my staff in making decisions as to which women would go up on the wall, I call them my women on the wall, so to speak, is that they had some connection, some positive impact to Massachusetts. And there are a lot of people. It's on my website, actually, KarenSpilka.com. But there are a lot of women that we never would realize had an impact. Either they were born in Massachusetts, grew up, taught college here, are doctors, just really incredible history of women. And we had to filter out a lot because, surprise, surprise, there's a lot of women who have had a major impact on Massachusetts history and it really angers me. I was going to say it bothers me, but it more than bothers me that either by accident or design, you walk around the State House and it's like women did not exist. There's one statue of a woman in the entire State House, and that's of a nurse in Nurses Hall. So I am trying to change that.
No.
And we are putting up another grouping of women soon. I was going to do it this last March, and every year for Women's History Month, I was going to put up another grouping because, as I said, there's a lot of women who have helped make Massachusetts what we are today. And for this round of women, we are focusing on women of color to help seize the moment right now. Because there are so many, and we will put that listing in the book, online as well. And I'm working to get a women's bust. We renovated the Senate chamber, and needless to say, all of the busts or statues were all of men. Some prominent men: Lincoln, Washington, Franklin. Others that people know. A few people that nobody knew of, nobody had heard of. So when we renovated it, I left 2 spots. One, and we had a bust of Frederick Douglass for a while that the African American Museum History lent us, because we put a quote of Frederick Douglass on the wall to guide us as we make our decisions. Truth, justice, humanity will ultimately prevail. And then the other bust where there's an empty spot, I want to put of a woman and then I've raised with the governor and the speaker to try to put in our hallways so that when people walk around the building, they see people that they identify with, whether it be a woman, a person of color, or just, we need to be more sensitive to that. And we need to just do it.
Agree. So thank you for being a trailblazer. And this is a passion of mine because I co-founded the Women in the Law program with Judy Brown, and we've highlighted lots and lots of illustrious women over the last 13 years. And I always walk around and brag that our grads are running the state. We have you as the Massachusetts Senate President. We have the Attorney General. We have the DA, Rachel Rollins. I mean, our women are rocking it in Massachusetts. So I'm happy to hear about all that work that you're doing, how you're changing it. Maybe we could have a Women in the Law event in the room sometime that shows all of the pictures of the women. So I'm just dreaming a little bit out loud.
Definitely.
That would be fun. My next question is about your work on mental health. You touched on it a little bit. You spoke of PTSD in your family, which totally makes sense with some of the things that they went through. I know it's a passion of yours. What are some of the programs that you're working on and that you feel could potentially be rolled out nationally?
Well, I did mention the More to the Story campaign on hoping to eliminate the stigma. My father would not seek mental health treatment. He saw himself as a strong male. Why would he need help? It wasn't him, it was everybody else basically at the time. And that approach ended up causing so much stress on him. He had a heart attack when I was in college and died. That's not an outcome that any family should have to go through. But the stigma still persists to this day so strongly. And I think that it's really important. And that's why I talk about it. The first time I publicly talked about it was in a large group in the State House. And I could feel my heart pounding. I was feeling really anxious over, exposing some of the stuff that I went through as a kid. And I was amazed. It was a room of about 300 people. And almost half of them came up afterwards and said, wow, that's so similar to the story of my father or my mother or my sibling or uncle, or almost every family experiences mental health issues in some way. And yet the stigma still persists. I don't understand it. It's almost like the way cancer was decades ago, where people did not talk about the C word because it was kept hush hush. So, I have worked really hard, and as chair of Ways and Means, I consistently put more funding towards programs and services that involved mental health, whether it be early intervention for young children, or programs for new mothers or veterans or seniors. And then now, as Senate President, I knew that we were going to be doing a major mental health reform bill. And I tasked Senator Julian Spear, the senator who's the chair of the Mental Health and Substance Misuse Committee, to work with also Senator Friedman, chair of healthcare, and to look at best practices across the state, across the nation. And we have a lot of good things going on. We have a lot of so-called jail diversion programs and trying to get people out, not even start in the criminal justice process. So there are a lot of different programs that we can replicate, and we have some funding. Unfortunately, the mental health bill still has not passed through the full legislature. I'm hoping to get it on the governor's desk. It would propel Massachusetts to be first in the nation in the way we approach mental health care. And again, looking at it as parity, we should be fully integrating mental health into our healthcare so that it's ultimately just health and wellness, or healthcare.
I think the same about alternative healthcare methods. So I grew up in Oregon, and all of that is covered there, such as acupuncture and those kinds of things. So I'm a big proponent of that as well. Well, thank you. I know that's one of your passions, so I wanted to touch on that.
Thank you.
Briefly, I want to talk about COVID and how you think we've responded, and what should we be doing presently that we're not potentially, and also maybe what impact have some of the federal level decisions, such as the second stimulus package, had on the state budgets and solvency. Can you talk about those together?
Sure. I think overall we have done a good job with dealing with COVID. I do want to say that for the most part, it's been a real journey, not something that any of us thought about or planned. And it's been one where I have worked very closely with the Speaker of the House and the Governor, so that we are united in our approach of making sure science guides us and making sure that we are taking steps to protect residents as much as possible. I do believe that we are, as a state, as a country, as a globe, basically, are still struggling with this. And I don't know if we're going to reach the levels that we had in April, May, June. I'm hoping not. But I can't help but take this opportunity, almost as a PSA as well, to just urge people to continue to stay vigilant. Please wear masks. Wearing a mask really does make a difference. Socially distance, wash your hands if you're not feeling well, even if you think it's not COVID, but you're not sure. Stay home, don't go out and don't meet with people. Get a test. There's a lot of testing sites across the state now, those that are free as well. So make sure that you do that. Don't take your foot off the pedal. We need to really make sure that we continue to stay vigilant, because this is going to be here for still quite a number of months, unfortunately. There are issues and areas that I am concerned about in particular. I think we may need to back off on some of the reopening, particularly those areas where a lot of people gather. I'm worried about women. We were talking about women in the workforce, because women still tend to be the caregiver in the family, even if they are working full time. I believe that women tend to take care of their children. They take care of parents, and childcare and transportation are two really key areas, key elements to economic recovery for us. We are in a new normal. I believe that we will, when we come out of this, there will be a new normal for us. And I think we need to learn lessons from what we are going through and what we are hearing from our friends and neighbors and people experiencing this. For example, if people are working different hours, whether it be in an office or at home, if more and more caregivers need to work at night and not as early in the morning, then we need to have childcare that fits that schedule, which we did not have previously. We need to make sure that we make changes to fit our new normal. And I don't believe that we are there yet. Transportation also, I've been urging for us to make some of the fixes now while the roads and bridges are not as congested. Now is the time to do it. So these are all things. With the federal level, it has been, I won't go down all the politics because we could all be here till tomorrow at that point. But it is, yeah, it's been very disappointing about no second federal stimulus. Thankfully, we have a pretty hefty rainy day fund, $3.5 billion, the highest the state has ever had, and among the highest in the nation, percentage-wise of the state budget. So we will need to pull on that. It is raining clearly, and we will look at other areas. My hope is that we do not cut programs and services, because now during the pandemic, so many of them people need more than ever. So again, we'll work closely with the House, with the governor. We've already put out some small business plans, some housing plans, and putting some money towards that. And we will continue to do that.
Great. I have felt very proud of our state, I will say, during all of this. And, working across both sides of the aisles, getting things done, closing schools when they need to be closed. My son's school is in Worcester, and it's moving to all remote learning after Thanksgiving. So that's where we stand. So, but I think we're doing a fairly good job. So thank you for your leadership in that.
Thank you. I think so too. Flexibility is needed in this circumstance.
I have just a couple more questions for you that I'd love to get in the aftermath of COVID, which we're not quite after it, but we've seen a lot of it. Racial injustice has really come up in 2020. We've seen that in a way that we haven't before, perhaps because we are home and due to COVID and the news cycles are longer now and not changing so fast. We have seen a lot about racial injustice. It really has struck home this year, I think, and really felt impactful. And eventually, around the corner of the election, what do you see as the key policy agenda items for 2021?
Well, I do believe racial justice is and will continue to be a key policy issue. I was proud. Again, I think you're absolutely correct and spot on, Miel. I think also the fact that so many people have cell phones and take pictures spontaneous and they can post them and they go viral. I don't think anybody could have watched that George Floyd video without just feeling, heartbreaking and wanting to jump on that cop and push him off, even though it was a video. It was horrible. It was horrible. There's no way to deny what happened there. And then to have it repeated across the country in very similar acts of violence. And you have, this is something our country has to deal with. And it's something that the Senate, we took very seriously. I appointed again, a working group. Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz and Senator Will Brownsberger headed up with some other senators, and they looked at what was in before the legislature. We put out, it was controversial, it was very emotional, it was something I really believed in when we do it. I still believe in very strongly. We are in negotiations with the House in conference committee. I do believe we will have a bill. Again, these issues are very complex, and I want it to be a very strong bill. But I approach working on racial justice as both a sprint and a marathon. I believe that the bill that we have before us in the legislature is the sprint part, where it's the right now, but the marathon is the long haul. I believe every bill we put out, whether it be education reform, economic development, healthcare, whatever it is, should be through a racial justice lens. And that is something that I intend to do as Senate President. We will continue to work on healthcare. I believe both mental health, if it doesn't get done this session, but prescription drug reform. We did a very strong prescription drug bill. People shouldn't have to choose between paying for their prescriptions or paying for a meal. I mean, that's outrageous. We need to lower the cost of prescription drugs, and that's what our bill would do right now, lower the current, not the future costs, but the current. I believe economic development will need to monitor us coming out of the recession. But that is also, again, going back to my roots, listening to people. What is it that we in the legislature can do? Where can we plug some holes or gaps, whether it be through specific programs or funding or whatever, to help our state come out of the recession. I think we're poised. We have a diverse economy, a strong economy. So I'm hoping that we can, continue to lower our unemployment rate and keep the revenue coming in. I believe that, there will be climate change. We did a very strong climate change bill in January. That's another thing that we need to look through other bills at times through a climate change lens, because it impacts so many other areas. So, we're very busy, and it never ends, and it should never end, because we continue to learn about new issues, new policies, new things that we need to do. So I offer for all the folks that are listening, if people have thoughts and ideas as to how we in the legislature, we in state government can help you, please let me know. I think it's really important. A lot of the best bills that I have done started by a constituent calling me, a young high school student, a grieving father, or whatever, calling to say, this is what I'm experiencing and I need help, or this is what I've been through. Nobody should have to go through this. And so they work with me, we file bills, we get them through. And again, it may take a long time, but persistence does pay off.
Doing a great job. I have one last question for you, and then I have one question that someone put in the chat that I would like to ask you. If anyone else has one more question, feel free to ask it. Do you live by or have a personal creed or mission statement? I always like to ask that question.
I don't really know if it's a creed or mission statement, but I don't have a lot of plaques or stuff up in my walls in the State House. But I have a small office where I do a lot of my work. And the one sort of, I guess it's a creed or something that I believe I live by is justice, justice, thou shalt pursue. I'm not a super religious person, but that really means a lot to me. I think that was instilled by my grandparents, my parents, by law school, clearly Northeastern, justice and equality and civil rights, social justice, economic justice, all aspects. That's what really motivates me. I believe that success is a lot of persistence, character, courage, and commitment, sticking to what you believe in, being fearless about it, staying true to my values and my convictions, and seizing opportunities. You have to be willing to take some risks and seize the opportunity, work the hardest and hope it comes out the way that you want. And if it doesn't, pick yourself up and eventually and just try again.
Well, you've certainly done that. This was a terrific conversation. I appreciate that. I wanted to ask the one question that came in the chat, which was, of course, what were your co-ops? They want to know how you got to where you were. Do you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. My first co-op was a general practice, Homans, Hamilton, and Marshall at the time. I don't know if people remember Bill Homans. He did criminal. I got a case doing riparian rights, I remember. I always was fascinated by that term. We did a divorce custody case with the woman lawyer was a prior Northeastern law grad at the time. We represented the father. And I mean, I remember so much of it. That was my first co-op. I wanted to try different aspects of the law. My second co-op was at a union law firm at that time. It doesn't exist fully anymore. It was Angoff, Goldman, Manning, Pyle, and Wanger. And one of the partners, the long name, and then they added more later on. But one of the partners was represented a case in my first co-op. So I called him up and said, would you take on, thinking about going into labor law. It was right at the heels of my first labor law class. And I said, would you take on a Northeastern co-op student? They had never done that, but they took me in. So that was my second co-op. My third co-op was at the Labor Relations Commission.
Great.
As a neutral, and my fourth was for an employer side. And that's what ended up happening. And then when I came out of law school, for a while, I worked for the union law firm for a little while, and then, you know, went on and worked for the state, and eventually became a fellow for arbitration years later. And and it was my personal background, volunteering for the school committee, for town boards and, you know, regional boards that propelled me into the legislature.
Terrific. Well, it's fun to hear your co-op story, and it's actually fun to talk to you this morning. It was terrific to learn all about your background. You're hearing lots and lots of positive things in the chat. Many fans of yours who've worked for you. Thank you for hiring co-op students, which you always do, and training other women and men to do what you're doing and follow in your footsteps. We're very proud of you and all of your work, and we brag about you often, but thank you for being here with us this morning. I know you're very busy. I'm going to let Dean Hackney just say one more quick thank you, but I enjoyed our conversation and appreciate all you do and your time.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this as well. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Madam President, for that inspiring narrative, all of your leadership of the state and more widely, and also, again, sharing your thoughts with our graduates and friends. Special thanks also to the Alumni Relations and Development team for creating a virtual alumni weekend for all of us this year. Megan, Miel, Jake, and Jen, again, thank you for wonderful programming. So I'll throw it back to Miel.
Terrific. Thank you, Karen. We appreciate you. We're going to dive into our next section. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're able to stick with us, we want you to, but if you have other commitments, we understand.
Thank you.
The next portion of our day is called Conversations With. This is a little segment we started last year that was really, really popular. It's fun, it's fast hitting. It's 15 minutes about some very diverse and unique graduates and their career paths. And we are going to dive in. Joseph, you're with us. Professor Meltzner, are you with us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, we'll make sure everyone's unmuted and the pictures are on. And I will have you take it away, our first conversation.
Okay, well, Joe, to talk about your career in 15 minutes is well absurd. So I'm going to start in a couple of different places before we get to it, because there's no way we're going to cover it all. So the first thing I would like to ask you is, can you kind of sketch a picture of what the law school was like in 1975 when you graduated? Because many people on this call have no idea about what it looked like, the feeling of it, the character of the building, and so forth. Can you kind of give a picture for the folks of what Northeastern was like in the 70s, in the mid-70s?
Certainly I can, and thank you very much, Dean. Before I respond to the question, I wanted to first greet my classmates of 45 years. I want to thank Miel and Jake and Jennifer for the great work. I want to thank Dean Hackney. And of course, I want to thank the Senate President, a fellow alum, and the great work that she's doing, particularly with an area of interest to me, which is mental health, which many of you know that. To answer the question, the class of 75, the great class of 75 was the fourth graduating class of the law school, of the newly opened law school. We were many first. We were first in the sense, I think, of having a Northeastern alum, a Northeastern undergraduate to be in the class. We were the first to have a significant number of minority students. And in fact, the one and only Latina, my good friend Migdalia Maldonado. We were the first to have the minority admissions subcommittee, which started that year. I still recall that Dean Burns was standing in front of our class and all the students supported the creation of the minority admissions subcommittee. We were the first to change the exams that first year students received, because we used to have exams. We only had one exam in January and the rest were at the end of the year. So if you didn't make it, you were gone at the end of the year because you only had one opportunity. We were the first to have civil advocacy and criminal advocacy. And now we're the first reunion to be had virtual. So we are the first in many, many ways. To talk about that time frame, as I started at the beginning, we were not far removed from the civil rights movement. I'm a product of that. I came to Northeastern as undergrad. I'm a double Husky in '67, and then went on to the law school. And so we were shaped by that. And I think that while there were about 12 or 13 students of color, one Latina, I think there was some apprehension because I think the class was 125 students. The students of color, we had to come together as a study group because I think that some people were reluctant in order to include diversity in many of the study groups, but that certainly changed as we got into the second semester. But we had a group of students who were still committed. There were activists in my class like Virginia Lee and Peggy Wiesenberg and Nancy Ursay, Michael Princey, my good friend Larry Citrullo. So that was the shaping of it. We had great professors. Judy Brown was instrumental. She worked with the students of color during our second semester. Dan Gavelberg, Richard Daynard, so we had a number of people, and there were others that influenced me throughout my law school career, like Fred Brown and even Tom O'Toole. I still remember the atomic pen, for our torts class. So Dean, what it was, we have a collaboration of a number of people which influences, have great classmates with whom I'm still friendly with to this day, 45 years later. That was the environment that we had during our time at Northeastern.
Okay, Joe. Well, thank you for doing that. I do want to ask one question that follows up that before we, I hope, had some time to talk about your incredible career. But what was it like emerging into the legal profession in the 1970s in Boston? A critical time as an African-American male?
It was quite difficult. I had, as an undergraduate, having experienced the co-op program and saying that I had an interest in law, during my first co-op as an undergraduate, I went back to New York, which is my home, to work at the Bed-Stuy Legal Services. So I had some experiences, several co-op quarters as an undergraduate, to study, to look at the legal profession. What I found interesting as far as co-op opportunities after my first year, many of the institutions, government as well as private sector, were not providing the opportunities to law students of color. So my first co-op was at the Welfare Department Appeals Division. Now, later on, I had the opportunity, in order to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office and also work at the Mass Attorney General's Office, one of a few students that were selected for that summer program under Attorney General Quinn. But I still recall when I got my last co-op job at what was then Goodwin, Procter and Hoare, I got off at State Street, went up an elevator, and the first thing the receptionist asked me was whether I was from the phone company. Yeah, there were some experiences that were not as positive during that time frame, but things have changed.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Folks, my internet connection is a little shaky. Sorry about that. Okay, well, getting to your diverse and incredible career, you have been a government official, a private practitioner, you've been a receiver, a town manager, the president of the NAACP, a high official of the Urban League, and I probably have left half of the things you've done out. So I'm kind of curious about two things. One is, what were the greatest hits along the way? And secondly, how did you keep your focus given the changing nature of these responsible positions over time? It's kind of like you're moving from one train to another very quickly. So give folks a sense of what the most meaningful experiences for you were, and kind of how you shaped your attitude given the diversity of these things.
Well, thank you, Dean. That would probably be a difficult thing and probably would take me more time than I could, than we've been allotted. And I know Miel will definitely shut us off at the point of 15 minutes. That's why I have my timer on. But I think that in terms of shaping it, my engagement, my classmates know I was one who was involved right from the beginning. And I guess I would say I've always talked about advocacy, equity, and I would focus in on efforts to organize. And I think my career, as well as my engagements as far as my volunteer activities, illustrate that. And I just want to mention one other professor, the late Tom Campbell, who the speaker mentioned, what influenced me. I went into the labor law and at the National Labor Relations Board, and I practiced real estate law, and probably one of the few attorneys in town that does zoning as well. But my sense is that in all of those things, the thread that you will see is in terms of engagement and in terms of leadership. And I think that that was something which I can talk about many of my classmates here, like Peggy Wiesenberg, who is one of the education advocates here in Boston, my classmate Virginia Lee, Nancy Ursay. All of these individuals, I think some of that is probably our own personalities, but I think that we shaped it, much of that, or honed it much during our time while we were at the law school. So we are ones who are committed. You know, we know that Northeastern has public policy is what we're noted for. And I think the students that come out of there, and I'll speak specifically on my classmates from the class of 75, we exemplify that. So the thread that runs, or jumping from train to train, just getting off at the station and getting on another train, that's what we do. When we find an issue that we feel passionately about, like me, in terms of mental health. So I joined the Senate president and my schoolmate on that issue, having lost my son 10 years ago. I'm into mental health and suicide. So we find the issues that we're passionate about and we follow through on them.
You worked for a time with Tom Menino, as the mayor, a long-time mayor.
Yeah, well, in terms of Tom Menino, the late Tom Menino was mercurial, but he was a good friend. I knew him much as during the time when he was a city councilor, and definitely as the mayor. I would consider myself a Menino-ite, and served in several capacities, not as an employee, but on certain boards. I headed up I sat on and chaired the Board of Appeals for the city of Boston. I was interim administrator at the Housing Authority. I headed up the appointed school committee campaign, and I'm sure that my friend and colleague Peggy Wiesenberg will say she forgives me because she loves me that much, even though I headed up the appointed school committee campaign. But nonetheless, you know, Tom Menino did many things, but Tom Menino ran the city. He was the head of every department, whether it was the Housing Authority, police, fire. He had his hands in everything, and no one in the city was going to cross Tom Menino because that was the price that you did not want to pay.
Now, nobody does the range of roles, often public roles, often involving difficult issues of social justice, which is a theme that runs throughout your career, without encountering some controversy. So you've given us a sense of the greatest hits. How about the greatest conflicts or problem way?
Well, it's interesting if you're going to, as I like to use metaphors. So if you're going to stand up in the foxhole, since sometimes you're going to get shot at, and that occurred during the time when I chaired the Board of Appeals back in 2004. There were persons who did not like my independence, and so therefore they tried to take me down unsuccessfully. But nonetheless, I spent a year under public scrutiny, et cetera, as far as whether I had violated any conflict of interest laws. Well, I was exonerated in 2005 for that. Most recently, I was appointed by Mayor Walsh to serve on the task force for the Boston police reform. Thus far, other than the police union, it seems to be that most people are favorably view the work that task force did. And I definitely feel that the persons with whom I served with were committed and got the job done. But if you're going to stand up in the foxhole, you're going to be hit. So when I was president of the NAACP here in Boston, there were many times we took on very difficult issues. I'm now chairman of the board of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. So there are many who will not agree with the social inequity. There are those who oppose the Black Lives Matters. There are those who oppose rights for women, and those people will exist. But I can tell you, none of that has thwarted my efforts in order to look for equity and justice for all.
Well, I got one more question, Joe. Thanks for doing this. Miel asked the Senate president at the end whether she had heard. Do you have a philosophy or a way you doing it? I suppose creed is a good way to say it. Do you have one?
Yeah. Well, I got part of your question, Michael. I just say my philosophy is to be committed, to be involved, to be a team player, to collaborate, and most importantly, if you have an issue, to get the job done. My personality is one. I'm not going to run into a wall, but I'm going to find a way in which to get around that wall, get over that wall. And so I'm tenacious in that respect. And I think that's exemplary of my personal views, but and the way I go about it. But I also think that it is exemplified in many of my classmates.
So last word, my deanship was a long time ago. I just want to tell you how good it was to have you in an alum leadership role during those years.
Well,
thanks for doing this.
Appreciate
Miel,
you
I
as well.
turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Mike. Terrific conversation. Joseph, you've accomplished so much. I know 15 minutes was just scratching the surface, but we leave them wanting more. That's how we do it. Next up, we have Todd Schuster, class of 90. He's a creative agent and he's done a whole lot of interesting things along the way. And we have Professor Daniel Medwed, University Distinguished Professor of Law and Criminal Justice. We have a dream team here. We're looking forward to hearing your conversation. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Miel. I hope everyone can hear me. If Miel can, that's okay. Excellent. Thank you all for joining us. A special thanks to Miel and everyone who is participating here. If you hear my kids and cats in the background, my apologies. In any event, it's really a delight to get to talk with Todd Schuster, whom I've actually known for many years. Law students are often told, and I bet many of you were told, you can do anything with a law degree. And then when you follow up with that question and say, well, what exactly do you mean? Usually you're met with crickets, right? No one actually has an answer. Todd has an answer for you because he has done virtually everything possible, a lot of creative things with his NUSL degree. So Todd, basically, could you describe your journey? We talk a lot about journeys at NUSL. What about your journey to your current role?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank Miel as well and everyone at the school for making it possible to talk to you today. And I'm incredibly nostalgic about my experience at law school. I love the institution. I believe in it, and it really did make my current career possible. And some may think in an attenuated way, but I think it was actually quite important and central to my own sort of personal development. So at law school, I studied all the courses that we take, but I focused, I think, on intellectual property law to a certain extent. I was also interested in entertainment law. My co-ops were half in the United States, half in France. And after law school, I got a fellowship to write a paper about copyright protection of computer software and expert systems under both French law and US law, so sort of a comparative law study. And it was inspiring. I went to Palmer & Dodge, the law firm that I think now is called something else. But at the time, Palmer & Dodge had, a prominent law firm, but also a literary agency within it, run by a guy named Ike Williams, who's still in Boston and still serves as a literary agent. But at the time, he was a prominent publishing lawyer. And to my great fortune, he sort of took me under his wing as a young lawyer and encouraged me to work in publishing and to think about intellectual property. There wasn't a spot for me at the agency at the time. It was very small. I moved on to Ropes and Gray and worked there for several years doing corporate law, some IP law. And I knew from my experience with Palmer & Dodge, I really wanted to be a literary agent because I had worked with several of the agents there and just, really fell in love with them and with the work they were doing. And so I asked Ropes and Gray if they might consider creating a competing firm, and they said no. So I left a little bit after that and set up shop with Lane Zachary and Esmond Harmsworth. We set up a firm called Zachary Schuster Harmsworth. That firm was around for about 20 years. And just a few years ago, we merged with another firm called Kuhn Projects to create Avitas Creative Management. And I just love it. We've been building our firm, bringing in a lot of young, interesting people who want to represent authors and work in film and television. And the last thing I'll say, so you can ask more questions, is that so much of what I learned, both at Northeastern, in terms of understanding people and understanding conflict resolution, contracts, IP law, et cetera, all of that together with my experiences as a young lawyer have really served me well in the publishing business because issues of libel come up, copyright law, contract law. So I feel really blessed that I had the education I did. So thank you.
Oh, that's terrific, Todd. I'm curious, have you ever found a circumstance where being a lawyer has hindered your ability to be an effective literary agent? I mean, sometimes people, of course, believe other people are skeptical of lawyers.
I think we all worry about the ways in which the particular experiences we have in any career might form biases. And I worked at big law firms that were wealthy and that served wealthy interests. And so I think part of my evolution as a human and just someone working in the world has been to understand and expand my exposure to all different kinds of people coming from all different kinds of places. And so I guess I acknowledge my own privilege and the ways in which some of my early experiences might have misguided me or led me to see things in too narrow a way. But I've been really fortunate to get to represent so many different kinds of people and to work with people from across the spectrum of human experience and experience. And it has made me that much more sensitive, I think, to all the richness that makes for who we are.
So it sounds like the diversity of your experiences on co-op and in your early years of practice certainly informed your current position. This might be a loaded question, but this is a tough audience here. Do you have a favorite author?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that. I don't have one favorite author. I tend to read around sort of almost opportunistically because a lot of my career involves comparing new works that I'm representing to works that have been very successful. So I'm always reading the bestseller list, et cetera. I mean, there's fiction writers who I love, like Colson Whitehead and Michael Chabon, Anthony Doerr, but I mostly represent nonfiction. So I'm often reading, again, sort of with a sense of purpose to understand different genres or to sort of elevate my own capacity to edit and shape books. So I'll read psychology books when I'm working on something that involves, human behavior, or I'll read politics or current affairs. I'm working currently right now with a former speechwriter under Obama, and I read books that pertain to the history of speechwriting just so I can understand and edit and be sensitive to the needs of the author. So I don't have one favorite author. But I love reading, and I love storytelling. That's really what and I was going to say, that at Northeastern I really loved case law. I loved reading cases because they're stories, and some of the stories are better than others. But certainly, for example, Judy Brown's constitutional law class, or I remember Dan Gavelberg reading about certain criminal syndicates, et cetera. Like, it was a lot of fun, and you also learned about the human condition. So anyway, back to you.
Do you gravitate toward crime novels or law-related novels, or do you run from them?
Neither. I mean, I've enjoyed some, from the cheesiest ones, like The Firm, to things that are more profound, like Civil Action. But I'm a dilettante or a polymath. I love reading everything to just learn about the world and sort of immerse myself in different people's lives, both fictional and real. And so, yeah.
Do you see any connections between books in terms of skill sets that particular authors have in telling stories?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of our job is to think about whether a main character, is relatable. I mean, there are characters that are intentionally not relatable, or that are relatable but anti-heroes, like Dexter on television. But we're largely focused on, is this character someone who readers will connect with, invest in emotionally? Are the stakes of that character interesting, significant enough that someone wants to stick with that book, across 80,000 words? Are the subsidiary characters interesting? Is the overall narrative structured in a way that creates dramatic tension? Is there suspense? Are we flipping the pages? So there's those elements we're always looking for in a story, whether fiction or nonfiction, so that readers want to stick with it. I pretty much work in the long form. It's very different if you're editing, say, a magazine article or a newspaper article, where you've got people for just a short amount of time. But when you're asking someone to plunk down, $30 for a hardcover, it's a different calculus. And a lot of my work has been learning how to be a better editor of the long form narrative.
Fantastic. How does your work at the literary agency and your work with books correlate with some of your other work in terms of the nonprofit you set up, the Peace organization?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, I set up, I was co-founder with my colleague Jennifer Gates and her client, Maya Satora, who's a client of our agency, something called the Peace Studio. And the mission of the Peace Studio is to inspire, empower, and give resource to performing artists and journalists who are committed to restorative storytelling, and in the framework and in service of peace. I had attended a conference that Maya Satora gave or participated in, where she spoke about the importance of building peace, and asked everyone in the audience to think about one small step they could take to help affect peace. And so at first I thought she was sort of talking to everyone else, but I internalized it, and I thought maybe there would be a way to use the relationships that I forged with writers, actors, musicians, et cetera, storytellers, journalists, to forge a new peace movement that's more relevant, more cool. And so we've had a lot of fun creating summits, performances. We did an interesting collaboration in Rwanda, where a group of recent conservatory graduates came together with their counterparts in Rwanda to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the end of the genocide there. And I got to go and watch and just be an observer, but I thought it was an incredible collaboration, and it was very moving to understand the story of Rwanda and the genocide, but also to see young Americans, many who were traveling for the first time, many were people of color who were experiencing Africa and this particular story, and understanding both what it means to experience oppression, but also to rise above it. So.
Well, as you know, Todd, in a few moments, we're going to hear from my colleague, Margaret Burnham, who's been engaged in a very exciting restorative justice project as well. So
great.
In the spirit of matchmaking, I'm sure that you guys have a lot of overlapping interests. So,
thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. Have you gotten some book projects out? I mean, not to say that there has to be cross-fertilization between your nonprofit and your agency, but have you developed some book projects as a result of that work?
In some ways the answer is yes, but it's almost the opposite, in that many of the authors I've worked with have been incredibly gracious in giving their time and expertise and love to the Peace Studio. I'm thinking, for example, of Otis Moss III, who's a prominent preacher. He leads the Trinity Church in Chicago. He's actually President Obama's pastor when he was in Chicago. And his father worked under King, and he too, Otis Moss III, is a disciple really of Martin Luther King. And he's writing a book right now about the importance of love and justice following in King's work. He's been incredibly generous to the Peace Studio. Deval Patrick in Massachusetts as a client and a friend, and he has given us a lot of time and helped bring some eyeballs to some of our events. So I've just been really grateful for the ways in which this community is coming together. And, you know, I think the Northeastern community was one of the earliest ones that gave me a lot of support and sort of saw and understood me and encouraged me. And I'm, you know, forever grateful. And I think we have to continue to work together, and it's exciting to see you. You look exactly the same as you did 20 years ago. And I still remember your mother at various events, who was such a force and amazing person. So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Todd. You look amazing as well. I can't believe it's been 20 years since we've seen
I'm
each
doing
other.
my best. Thank you.
And now it's a virtual experience. Well, let's bring it back to Northeastern, since you already did a little bit. How specifically did that experience shape your ethos? Was it the social justice lens? Was it the experiential education? What piece of it? Or pieces?
It's all those things. It's all those things. I was thinking about, you know, people were mentioning their favorite professors, and certainly Judy Brown was incredibly encouraging. I learned so much from her, Steve Subrin, Dan Gavelber. I remember a gentleman named Nathaniel Berman, who I don't think is at the school any longer, but was a really fascinating teacher of international law, sort of public law. I remember people who just were inspiring to observe, like Jim Rowan and Professor Daynard, who I think is on this call, because they were committed to social justice, committed to lifting up the poor, but also just the school's ethos of diversity and wanting to give voice to the voiceless. That phrase, which I feel as though I learned at Northeastern, has been incredibly empowering as a literary agent, because that's pretty much what we do. In fact, it's in the mission statement of our agency. So yeah, the commitment to social justice, the integrity of the learning process. I also think I learned how to write better and edit better at Northeastern. People joke about lawyers not being able to write, but the reality is that many of us were fortunate to learn about legal writing and how to structure an argument and write a brief, et cetera. And a lot of those skills serve me to this day. So I'm tremendously indebted.
Well, on the note of lawyers and writing, Todd, something just came across the chat to me privately. How do you handle unsolicited submissions from classmates? What's your response to that? Since you mentioned how great Northeastern law graduates are at writing, I'm just curious.
Yeah, formally on the website, it says I don't take unsolicited manuscripts. But in truth, you're always welcome to reach out to me, especially anyone from the school. And if I don't think I can be helpful, I can refer that person to someone else at our agency. It's true that many of the projects that we take on, we solicit or are referred to us by trusted sources. But there are numerous agents at our firm who actively read unsolicited manuscripts, and they find those golden nuggets. And anyway, I encourage whoever that is to be in touch.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm sure people are thinking how to approach you at this very moment. So that's very kind of you, Todd. In terms of the difference between handling the books, the book deals, and movies and multimedia arrangements, what are some of the differences? I'm just curious. I don't know much about it.
Sure. Well, the buyers are different, first of all. Obviously, the publishers, most of them are in New York, and there are 5 major publishers, and then there's a number of prominent independent publishers who we tend to do business with. But publishing has been democratized in many ways, in that there's a really interesting and broad bench of small niche publishers that are interested in all sorts of books. In terms of film and television, where I do a lot of work, the buyers traditionally have been the big networks and the big studios. That has shifted with all the technology that we're familiar with, so that now Netflix, Apple, Amazon, Hulu, the streamers are tremendously wealthy, acquisitive, and open to all sorts of content. So it's been really exciting for us to sort of develop our expertise in books, but then also to find ways to get involved, helping clients see their works to the small and big screen, and in many instances, the kind of screen you can hold in your hand, or the laptop, because it's just it's really a golden age, as people say. It's a little bit trite, but it's true that there's so much opportunity to tell your story audiovisually now, and so I've had a lot of fun in that realm over the last several years.
Oh, that's exciting. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to go back to a theme you sort of alluded to, or something you mentioned a while ago. President Obama, did you by chance have the opportunity to meet him as part of your work for peace?
Well, I'm an unabashed fan. One of my clients is the former social secretary, one of the social secretaries, a wonderful guy named Jeremy Bernard, the first male social secretary, I think, in history. So when he was at the White House, he snuck me in twice. Once for a Christmas party where I got to shake the president's hand, sort of like that, over a crowd. But then he also invited me to his own retirement party, his last day of being social secretary. And that was a very intimate gathering. So it was a lot of fun. I actually brought my daughter. And so when we had the chance to approach the president, I sort of pushed her forward, and he asked her why she wasn't in school that day. But in any event, he's a wonderful man. I miss having him as our president. And I hope to have more opportunities to collaborate with him in the future. So.
Maybe a book in the future.
Yeah, I know he's finished the first volume and he's on to the second, but I'll have to probably wait for the next one.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, thank you, Todd. I realize that
pleasure. Thank you.
Is up, but it was really delightful to chat with you and
you.
to hear about your many successes and your ties to Northeastern. Thank you.
More soon, I hope. Thank you.
Terrific. Bye-bye.
Wow. Terrific job, both of you. It's so fun to hear about diverse and new ways to use the law career. And you're doing such great work, Todd, on all fronts. So thank you. I'm also an Obama fan, so wanted to hear your thoughts on that. It's nice to hear you have an ongoing relationship. Thank you both for spending your time with us this morning. Great
Pleasure.
job, Daniel, as always. We have next up a terrific couple. I'm going to call them a couple. We have Kathy Henry, class of 00, the 20th, who's in a tie for the class of 75 with the most people coming this weekend. So great job to the OOs. I work with Kathy on the Women in the Law Advisory Board and feel fortunate to be able to spend time with her throughout the year. Her interviewer is one of her favorite professors, Mary O'Connell. Mary, you're out there. And she specifically requested Mary. Mary is class 75, so she's in the dead heat with the class of 00 in terms of most people attending. But we look forward to your conversation, and we turn it over to both of you.
Thanks, Miel.
Thank you, Miel. Kathy, you look wonderful. It's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful
Oh,
to talk to you again. But we're supposed to talk about your job, not just how much we like each other. You are the general counsel at Eastern Bank and also the head of human relations. Yeah. Kathy, isn't that 2 jobs or 5?
Yeah, call my boss when this is done. I'd love to hear how that goes. I have to just start by saying I'm so blown away by this already. Thank you, Miel and Jennifer and Jake. Thank you, Mary, for agreeing to be my interviewer, and the people who have spoken so far. It's been an incredibly inspiring morning. So I just want to say thank you so much. So grateful to be here. Okay, so yes, I have 2 jobs. That's new. It effectively starts next week on November 2nd, but I'm currently the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and soon to be Chief Human Resource Officer of Eastern Bank. We just crossed the threshold, I think, to be having 15 billion in assets. And officially last Thursday, we took the company public. So we got to virtually ring the bell on Wall Street, which was probably the lamest celebration I've ever been a part of. It was an incredible effort by a huge team. And I think Joseph talked about being sort of one of the things that he does in his work is being part of a team. And I very much value that. It was a team effort.
So what is this new piece of your job going to add to what you do or change what you do, or why did you agree to do it?
So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So I joined Eastern Bank about 4 years ago. For people that don't know Eastern, of course, I have the boring job because I work at the bank and all these other people are doing all this, very cool stuff. But as far as banks go, I would say if you ever lined up all the banks across the country and said, what bank is most like Northeastern Law School, it would be my bank. There is an incredible, we kind of joke a little bit, but it's a for-profit bank, don't get me wrong, but it has a nonprofit ethos because it was a 200-year-old mutual until we recently took it public. And so that the mutuality, the commitment to the communities that we serve, really impacts everything that we do. And as the general counsel in particular, we get sort of the gray areas, the tricky issues from customer stuff to board stuff to regulatory stuff. And always, not even in the back of my mind, in the forefront of my mind is sort of what's the right thing to do? Is this going to impact someone really negatively? Can we work with the customer? Who is the customer? And that I never really had that in my job before, and I really, really value that. So this is a sort of a long wind up. Anyway, I have a great legal team, and that legal team is sort of allowing me to take on an expanded leadership role. So before my new job, I probably had a team of 10, including a research department, and I'm taking on a 35-member team within the HR department that supports 1,800 people. And a big part of this as well is leadership around diversity, equity, and inclusion, something I'm passionate about. So there's a real opportunity there to take the bank from what I would say is, pretty good on DE&I today. We have to get better, and the velocity of getting better has to be much stronger. So working with the CEO and the president of the bank, both of whom are very committed to this issue, and our board, which is very diverse and very committed to it, is something that's also going to be, I think, a big part of my job.
For anybody who's never gone on the website of Eastern Bank, I highly recommend it. The first thing you'll see is David Ortiz smiling, and that makes my day. But last time I went on, I also saw a reminder that it was National Coming Out Day. Now, how many banks would have that on their website when you opened up? So can you talk a little bit about the tremendous commitment to diversity that Eastern has had, and how you've been part of shepherding that for the 4 years that you've been there?
Yeah, so it is, again, it's, you go to a law firm and it talks about culture. I spent my first 11 years at a big law firm. And then I went to a private company that was big on being a progressive company. And you think, okay, yeah, we're a progressive company. And then I joined my bank and I was like, oh, no, this is a progressive company. Oh my gosh. And so, it's interesting. Eastern did something we had never done before. When George Floyd was murdered, and there was this real racial reckoning in the country. Of course, every company was making their statements saying that they're against racial injustice, et cetera. One of the things that we did as a company is we sent a letter to every customer, and I worked with the CEO on that letter. And you get sort of drafts of these things. And so, it's like, no, you have to say murder. We have to say we stand with Black Lives Matter. Like, if we're going to send a letter, we're sending a letter. Let's not be afraid and sort of clutch our pearls with the letter. And so we sent out that letter. We've never done that before. We didn't do it for gay rights. We didn't do it for pay equity. We didn't do it on immigration. All of these things we've taken strong public stances on, but we did do it here because this was different. What was interesting is I got to see all the complaints, the customers who were angry that we sent this letter. And then we didn't just send a letter, we bought billboards and said, Black Lives Matter on the billboards, we support this. So we didn't just want to go on our website and say, oh my gosh, we're really sorry about this. So there's been internal work. That was a real external piece that we wanted to do. And then as the lawyer and getting the responses and figure out, do we respond? What do we say? It's important that, and I say this to my team, as the lawyers, we always have to keep racial justice social justice at the forefront of everything that we do, even though we work at a bank, because it comes up in HR issues, it comes up in customer issues. Again, I said it comes up in regulatory issues, and we'll probably talk about this in a few minutes, but banks are in a certain position, I think, to impact these issues too, and we have to think creatively and be bold in our actions going forward.
Kathy, a couple of the questions that have already come across the chat are a topic that you and I know we're going to get to. Maybe we should talk about it now. There's a pandemic going on.
Yep.
And banks have got to both continue to function during the pandemic and also to take on a pretty important role in moving money from the federal government out to people. So can you talk a little bit about what it's been like and how Eastern has tried to be the best bank it can be since the pandemic started?
Yep, sure. So I think the crisis has had opportunities for us as an employer and as a bank. We were in the middle of a secret IPO when the pandemic hit. So it was like taking a 200-year-old mutual company public, and then a pandemic hits, and a few of us who were sort of driving the IPO had to quickly pivot, put that on ice, and then deal with getting, if we have 1,800 employees, we sent 90% of our non-retail staff home to work. So we had to figure that out. We had to protect our employees, number one. And then we're an essential business. So we had to figure out a way to protect our colleagues who are on the front line, and then to protect our customers. So one thing we did for our colleagues is we paid them battle pay or enhanced pay. We just stopped that in October. I think we were the last company on the face of the earth, or at least in the United States, that paid all the way to October, because we felt like they were taking an enhanced risk and people were coming to work. We were also incredibly flexible with people that were afraid to go to work, or had to take public transportation to go to work, or had a child with asthma, or had an elderly person move in because they didn't want them to be in their assisted living. So, and we continued to pay people again until October. So we looked at our employment practices. I'll never forget where I was. I was actually in the car with my husband and my kids having a call about what we were gonna do. And I said, look, whatever decisions we're going to make, they have to come from a foundation of generosity to people, because we're in a crisis and we've never had to figure this out before. And I think the generosity toward our colleagues served us incredibly well. I think we got a lot of loyalty out of it. We got an engagement survey and it was like off the charts. And we didn't do it because of that. It was the right thing to do. But it was just one of those important moments where you're like, I had no idea, but luckily we made the right decision. And I think we made the right decision because we came at it from a people's first. A second piece of that was we have a lot of branches in urban areas and in communities of colors that don't have drive-ups. So when it was sort of at the worst and we were figuring out, do we close branches? Well, maybe we'll just push people to the drive-ups. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We have to be there for our urban customers where we don't have drive-ups. People don't have cars. We can't shut it down for those folks. So that was a commitment that we made. We never shut those branches down. We really focused on those areas. And again, it was the right thing to do. We didn't have a playbook for it. We feel good about that. But the biggest thing that we did, and Mary and I talked about this when we were prepping for this, is I think people know about the CARES Act and the Paycheck Protection Program. And this was the federal government through the Small Business Administration pushing a ton of money, wanting to get a ton of money out into the small business community, because they're the background really of the engine that drives our economy. And the way to do that was through the banks. And so in the spring, with very little guidance, all of the banks started getting hit from small businesses who were desperate for the money. And so we ended up, and again, our employees, our colleagues, many of whom were working from home, they're taking care of their kids, they're taking care of their parents. They worked literally around the clock to process all of these applications. And we punched above our weight big time as a bank. We're the #1 small business lender anyway in New England. And so I think there was more pressure on us to process as many loans as possible. But I mean, we worked incredibly hard on that. Not me personally, my colleagues, I'm very proud of them, around the clock, on weekends, Easter Sunday, primarily just to get money into the small businesses that were supporting our communities. And if we didn't do it, they would have failed. And so that was a tremendous effort, not just by Eastern, but by many banks. We're really proud of that. And we were also focused on communities, businesses of color. The PPP didn't necessarily, at the time it was created, it didn't really empower banks with the ability to track, businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, et cetera. But through relationships that we have a foundation that's focused on closing the wealth gap for businesses of color. We also put sort of, I would say, extra effort in making sure we got the word out to businesses of color to say, come to Eastern Bank, we want to support you, we want to help you through this process. So again, that was probably the third part that I certainly feel like we did an extraordinary job with in the middle of a crisis without, there was no playbook. And it was an exciting, exhausting time. We're still in the middle of it. And, we're going to just do our best every day.
Another question that came up was, of course, banks and going forward and being worried about mortgage foreclosures. I don't know if that's something that's been under your purview and been under discussion. And
yep, it's not under my purview, although I'm part of the conversation. It's certainly something that we're talking about. I'm also on the board of trustees for the Boston Bar Foundation, and we had a meeting last week, and we were talking about this as well, because there's a call for lawyers to get involved to help prevent foreclosures and obviously advocate for people in housing court. So sort of Eastern Bank's philosophy on this is to work with our customers. We don't want to have to foreclose on people. I don't know how our foreclosure rates historically have compared to other banks, but we don't foreclose very often. It's like you do everything you can to be patient. And that's a philosophy that our credit team has, which in our workout group is even before the crisis, to be patient with our customers. No bank or at least we certainly don't want to foreclose on our customers. And so there is tremendous focus at the bank, at my bank, on working with our customers and doing everything that we can. We're a business, of course, but everything that we can to keep businesses afloat, keep families in their homes, because there's a real appreciation for the unbelievable and unprecedented crisis that people are dealing with.
so can we circle around and bring Northeastern in? And,
Yes.
and can we talk about how your years at Northeastern are part of what you are now and where you are now and what you do?
Yes. So, I loved Northeastern. I still love Northeastern. It was and continues to be my anchor. Miel mentioned I've been involved with Women in the Law. Amy, my classmate, Amy Carlin, co-chaired it this year. I see Kathy Morris's beautiful face on my screen. I had done sort of social justice work before I went to Northeastern. That's why I went to Northeastern. And at Northeastern, I learned so much from my colleagues, so much from my professors, including you, Mary, and people like Jim Rowan. I ended up going down sort of a path I never expected, which was I spent 11 years at a big law firm. But what I learned at Northeastern and what I still try to do in my life today is, and Jim Rowan was instrumental in teaching me this, you can be a lawyer at a firm or at a bank in the for-profit world, but what else are you going to do? There's a real opportunity as a lawyer to serve on nonprofit boards, so I've done that. I was the pro bono partner at Choate. I continue to be involved in the nonprofit community. So it's the foundation of doing well, doing good, making sure that as I go on in my career, and the Women in the Law Conference has been a big, huge part of this, that I'm carrying and pulling up the women and the attorneys of color and first generation lawyers like me behind me, saying, let's, learn from me. How can I help you? We stood on your shoulders, Mary, Judy Brown's shoulders, all of these amazing women. And I feel like Northeastern reminded me, my parents taught me, but Northeastern reminded me, you have an obligation to help other people too.
So others in these conversations have been talking about creeds. I think maybe we just heard yours, Kathy. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And the creed comes from, being, and I think the Senate president said this, the granddaughter of immigrants, first generation lawyer. I grew up in the city of Boston. I still live in the city of Boston. Really just, being in service for others, no matter what you do. I don't care where you work, you can be in service of others. For me, a big part of it is my colleagues. It's also our customers. But it's really, and making sure that everything that I do at work, at home, and in my life, it's not just about me. It's not just about my kids, it's about my community. And Northeastern certainly strengthened that ethos in me, and has been, like I said, an anchor through everything I've done. There's nothing I've done in my career that didn't start at Northeastern. All the good stuff anyway.
And going forward with these, I mean, I suppose you just have to survive the pandemic at this point and do whatever the bank needs to do. But I suspect you took on your new job and with some ideas about what you hope to do going forward. So if you could talk about that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to just circle back to the DE&I issue, because we're not going to be successful if we have groupthink in our organization. We're not going to be successful if our bank doesn't look like the communities that we serve. We're not going to be successful if, our bank leadership team looks like the wall before the Senate president got there, right? And so we have diversity on our boards. We have some diversity on our leadership team. I'm, a woman on the leadership team, but we don't have enough. And so what I'm really excited about, and the change that I hope I can be a part of over the next, I don't want to say 10 years, I want to say, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, et cetera, is being smart and being data-driven and looking at, where are the people of color in our organization? Where are the leaky pipes? How do we, it's not a, do this or do that, it's an and a both. How do we make our colleague base more diverse at all levels of the organization, so that our business, like every business, because the studies support this, has a diverse group of voices at the table, because that's how businesses succeed today. It's not through groupthink, it's not through all the same voices with, all the same views. And so I'm really excited to be a part of that transformation in the next, like I said, starting next week and hopefully continuing. And it's an exciting time, I think, to have this dual role. A lot of lawyers end up having oversight of HR, and it's something that I've always been interested in. And I told Amy in the chat, I'll be calling her Amy Carlin, because that's what she does. So I'll be calling my Northeastern friends for good advice, but it's exciting. So I think DE&I is something that's going to be at the top of my mind going forward.
Kathy, are you still running marathons?
So not at the moment. No, I ran my last one. I did 10, and when I hit 10 Bostons, I was like, this is kind of good. I might,
Wow.
take my foot off the gas, because it was a lot. I'm running a teen center right now, Mary, with my 3 kids, so it's a little busy. But no, I swapped my running shoes for a Peloton mostly, and so that is actually getting on that bike and sweating. Really, I think that's what helped me get through the pandemic, probably more than anything. But I do still run, and I put this in the chat. When I run, I always wear my, the future is, the future is feminine. Oh, the future is female. How did I forget? The future, because I wear it. The future is female. That I had my prior favorite t-shirt was like a superhero t-shirt that had the women Supreme Court justices on it. And it was always my first layer. I ran the marathon in 2015 for Martin Richard, who was killed in the marathon bombings. And to be honest with you, after running for Martin, my next marathon meant nothing to me. So I guess if I do one again, and I think maybe when I turn 50, I'll have to run for a nonprofit, because I think I need that at this stage of my life. Otherwise, I'm just on the Peloton, sweating it out. Highly recommend the Peloton.
When we were having our conversation, we noticed that there were only 2 women in these conversations. Not that I haven't enjoyed them all, and I'm looking forward. Actually, that's not true. Margaret's coming up. There's 3 of us, right? Isn't Margaret coming up?
Yes.
But it reminded me that you have got 3 kids, including a set of twins. And I am sure you are a wonderful mom, and the whole juggling of family. I mean, I'm sure the guys do it too, but I think for women, it's a particular set of challenges. And have you got any good advice for people not quite as far along in their career as you are?
Well, I have women on my team who have younger kids, and during the pandemic, you're just getting through the day, and I think some people are getting through the hours. What I always say to women who have kids who are younger than mine is, it gets easier. Even if that's not true, I say it anyway. Sometimes I lie just to make people feel better, and that's a good example of a Kathy Henry lie. But actually, I do think it gets better. You know, when I was litigating at Choate, I made partner, gosh, you know, right after I had my third, 6 months after I had my third baby, and I sort of binge birthed. I had twins, and then I shockingly had a third, and I think people thought I was crazy. I was crazy. And so being on that treadmill at that time with, you know, 3 in diapers and, you know, 3 little ones, and then 3 starting their little school journey, and then the firm, and, you know, it was, I look back and I'm like, I don't even know how I got through it, except I do know I have an amazing, amazing husband, partner. And so that, you know, it was huge. I also have resources. I was able to pay for daycare and all of that stuff. So were it not for the support of my husband, I don't know how single parents do it, were it not for my resources. But there were days when I hung on to my career by my fingernails. And there were days and nights when I cried because I felt so overwhelmed. And my dad had serious mental health issues during that time too. So there was a lot going on in my life. And I got through it. And I am so, I have to say, I don't say this very often, I'm so proud of myself that I didn't give up on my career because I wanted to. And if my husband wasn't the teacher, if he was the major breadwinner, it would have been so much harder for me to stay in the game. But I pivoted, I got away from litigation, I went in-house, there were things I did. But I'm so happy that I hung on. And it's really important for me to say that to the women who are coming. Hang on if you can. If you can't, it's okay. But if you do, you'll be really happy because it does get easier, even when they're teenagers. But I really think it's important that the women who have done it be there for the women who are doing it, who are in the thick of the madness of little ones in careers, because it's so hard and it feels so impossible. And it's not impossible, but we have to recognize that it's hard. And I say that to the women on my team with little kids all the time, especially in the pandemic. If somebody says, oh, I'm so sorry, that's my kid, I'm like, bring them on camera, I want to see them. You know, just small ways that we can do to say, I know you're a full human, bring your full human self to work. And you know what? If you need to be offline for 3 hours in the middle of the day and you need to hop on at night because that's how you're juggling your life, I'm all for it.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Mia. Mary, thank you. Thank you for letting me do this. It's an honor to be here.
Kathy, it was such a joy. From the day I heard from Miel that you would like me to interview you, and I sort of had to catch my breath and say, really, Kathy Henry wants me? To the chats that we've had leading up to this. And I keep, you know, so many of the wonderful people who've talked today have talked about how Northeastern led them to their career. But it sounds to me like you work for the Northeastern University School of Law Bank. I mean, those two institutions.
That's why I'm here. I love it. Exactly. Exactly.
And that's what you did, Kathy. It didn't happen without you. Miel, are you here to tell us that we have to move on?
I am. We could hear from both of you all morning and actually each of our speakers, but we're keeping this short and sweet. It's your 15 minutes of fame-ish. And you did a terrific job, Mary. It's so nice to see you. We miss you all the time. Kathy, we love you, and you got lots of love in the chat. Lots of big fans, class of 00 fans, and other fans. But you're doing a great job for your community, for your bank, for your family. We're proud of you. Thanks for being a part of Women in the Law. Mary, we will see you in DC at some point when we're allowed to travel.
Yeah.
And
thanks,
you are loved. You are loved and missed.
Look forward to it. Look forward to coming back to Boston.
Thanks, Mary.
So our last conversation is going to be scintillating, just like the previous ones have been. We're very fortunate to have Adrian Bishpan, class of 10, a young rock and roll star. He's an ADA with Suffolk County, and he will be interviewed by our own world famous Professor Margaret Burnham, who's a University Distinguished Professor of Law and Director of the Civil Rights and Restorative Justice Program. Thank you both, and Margaret, take it away.
Thank you so much, Miel. Oh, wow. It's been really, really exciting to be part of this program. Beautiful program, Miel. Thank you. Thank Brad, all those who put it together and gave us an opportunity to see what our whole full community looks like, the continuity, the diversity in this community. It's just been an amazing experience. And particularly for me, you know, I came to Northeastern in 2000, but to see the folks from the earlier years and to hear what those earlier years looked like for people like Mary. Just really wonderful program. So Adrian and I are sort of bringing up the tail end here. Adrian, you're the class of 10, so you're the baby in the room here. But it's so great to see you and to have you chat with all of us about your career as a prosecutor. And you know, you've gotten lots of awards and commendations for your work over the last 10 years since you graduated from the law school. You've been working in the Suffolk County DA's office. But I wonder whether that's what you had in mind when you went to law school. Did you think you might want to be a prosecutor?
So thank you very much for having me and for having this conversation. It's so great to see you and everyone else. It's kind of crazy whenever anybody asks me to speak, you know, I think back on, you know, where I started and my anticipation of where I might be at this point. And no, this is not where I planned on being, where I thought I was going to be when I started law school. I wasn't set originally on being a prosecutor. Like most of my classmates at the time who were interested in criminal law, and I think most students at Northeastern who are interested in criminal law, I wanted to be a public defender, actually. And so I knew that I loved criminal law and I loved litigation and civil rights. But like I said, I wanted to defend people. And so as part of my vision for that, in my last co-op, I applied to CPCS, which is the Public Defender's Office in Massachusetts. But I also applied to the Suffolk DA's office, because at the time my thinking was, well, I'll go in and I'll be a spy and I'll get the information and then I can use it against them when I become a public defender. I'll just know how they work.
Oh, wow.
So
it didn't work out that way.
No, apparently not. I guess they turned me. But what really happened was when I was there in my internship, and after I got that, I found out that being in that office, at least that office in particular, and I often tell people that I know that I wouldn't be able to be a prosecutor in many, if not most, offices around the country. But working in that particular office, I saw people who were not just concerned with wins or convictions, but were trying to help people, people who had drug addictions, getting them into programs, dealing with issues of homelessness, trying to get individuals who had anger issues into batterers programs or anger management, things like that. And, you know, I also saw more of the unfortunate fact that the most of the defendants that are coming into the system are Black and brown people, and looking at that and seeing all the other people on the prosecution side of the table not necessarily looking like them, and being able to be a person of color and be on that side in that seat, and hopefully give someone walking in that door some semblance of hope that they're going to be treated with respect, and that somebody else may have some idea of what they've been through and where they're coming from, I felt was something that was important.
Has it turned out that way for you? Have you, now that you've been in the job for 10 years, have you been able to kind of realize that ambition to present a different face and perhaps a different kind of you know, connection with the folks who come through the court system as defendants?
I definitely have, and it's been amazing to see. I've met with people who have cases. I've sat actually in restorative justice with people that I've had open cases with. I've met with young defendants to help them learn literature. I've gone to jails and sat with people who have been convicted of even in prison after committing murder, and being able to build rapport with them, being able to learn from them and about their own experiences. And like I said, having conversations and having people tell me, like, nobody's ever talked to me like that. I've never seen a prosecutor willing to like sit down and talk to me. No matter what happens on a case, I always go over at the end of something and tell the person, you know, good luck and I hope that you do well. You know, even if I haven't had a more extensive conversation with them. And many people, even some, you know, unfortunately, that have more serious cases, I've had conversations with them, or their lawyers will talk to me, even if they're not willing to talk to me directly, and say, hey, my client understands that, you're doing your job and you're being fair and ethical about it. And they just, they tell me that they respect you. And I honestly really appreciate that, because that's how I try to carry myself in the last 10 years, and how I try to practice law, as a prosecutor, so that I live up to those ideals.
So Adrian, of course, you're working in the office of our family member, our alum, Rachel Rollins, and she identifies with a movement across the country to bring progressive reform to the prosecutor's office. And so these are folks, we've seen them in Philadelphia and Baltimore, out there in California, San Francisco. And of course, Rachel is a leader in this group of progressive prosecutors who understand that their role in that their job is really public safety and harm reduction, but they also see reducing mass incarceration as part of their mission. How does this play out in your day-to-day work in Prosecutor DA Rollins' office?
So I think that kind of the biggest way that it gets played out, let's say within the office in general, is within the district and municipal courts, where the bulk of the cases that are going through the system occur. Although I myself work now in the Superior Court on indicted cases. Those cases are the cases that tend to, clog up the system, and that people end up getting either small stints or longer stints, depending on the issue, that tend to be driven by poverty, mental health, addiction, and things like that. And with the policy reforms that DA Rollins has put in place, we are seeing we're handling cases in much more of a way where we're trying to, the first view is not incarceration, diversion, and handling things in those ways. But from my perspective and kind of my day-to-day on the cases that I handle, although they are more serious, and so sometimes that type of diversion may or may not be an option, we're looking more at data-driven decision-making, right? We have a crime strategies bureau that I'm a part of that works with information around the city to gather where crime is happening, how much it's happening, who's actually committing the most serious offenses, so that we're focusing on the individuals who really need incarceration, or really are that we've kind of tried everything we can to do that. And and I don't want to say,
Adrian, you're probably working really closely with the police department, with the Boston Police Department. So even if your approach is data driven, as you say, how do you work with the police to make sure that these two parts of the system are really working together, collaborating?
Right. Well, so I mean, that's obviously, there's some challenges with that. It's their own agency. They keep their own information, and a lot of times we're handling the cases, right, that they're bringing to us. And at least in Massachusetts, we're not involved a lot of times in the beginning. The actual, just like, what are we going to necessarily charge on every single case? However, it comes into play then, obviously, in terms of what we're doing with those cases when we're asking for bail, if we're asking for bail at all. Whether we're moving more in terms of, if we think someone is a danger to the community, moving under the appropriate statute to just have them held, as opposed to just asking for some exorbitant amount of bail that they're never going to make, right? And not asking for bail in the cases where we don't think that someone is a danger, or asking for minimal bail if that's what's appropriate.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to pivot, because Miel is going to join us in a few minutes with with that hammer of hers. So we're here with our Northeastern, your classmates, my colleagues, our Northeastern family. So I do want to ask you, in terms of your job, what is it that you would have wanted to learn at Northeastern that maybe we weren't there for you for that? I mean, I hope I was there for you in class for some things, but maybe they have nothing at all to do with the work that you're now doing.
No, yeah, I think that you and many of my professors were there for me in a more intangible or less structured way, I guess, to learn some of those things that I have now learned more out in practice. I mean, I will say that I think, shout out to the co-op office and the co-op program at Northeastern. It's an amazing program, and I think one of the keys to learning is experiential, and actually being in the field, and having my internship and having the experience that I had obviously changed the trajectory of my career, but actually learning day to day. But I think the two things that I would say, I think that most people need to learn, or would be better if they learned in law school, is one, especially in the criminal field, things don't have to be as adversarial as you may anticipate them to be, right? Like I've learned, and I have many, as I mentioned, classmates that are now public defenders that I work with every day, that we're just trying to figure out, let's be fair and just about how we're handling things and being respectful with each other, and to ideally try to come out with some type of outcome that's fair, and appropriate in a given case, right? And then the other thing is just that in dealing with in criminal cases, you're dealing with people and individuals that have lives and experiences that they bring into the door when they come into the courtroom, or when that one particular incident happened to them. And no one person should be defined by their worst action or day. And that doesn't explain who they are as a person or their entire life. And so knowing more about people and the community, and the effects of social issues and poverty and all those different things that we learn about now in school, to then coming in as a new ADA, having that knowledge, I think would be immense and very important, because you can't make decisions in a vacuum, and having that basis of knowledge, I think, informs exactly how you handle the cases.
Thanks. Thanks. So Adrian, so Kathy talked about holding on to her career with her fingernails. That life work balance thing that we strive to get right, not just when we're parents of young children, but really across our careers. I'm now taking care of a parent and grandchildren as well, and I know you have a new baby. So I just want to let's shout out to those, to the pops who are actually doing the same thing, trying to get this thing right, trying to make sure that they take care of the home front while they're doing their very best, and for you in public service. How do you do it?
Yeah, so when Kathy was saying that, it really spoke to me. I'm sure I have a long road ahead of me in that regard, because my daughter's only 6 months old. But even though in those 6 months, I think it's coming at obviously a huge time, and a much different time than ever before, where working from home, right, completely, with a newborn. And so there's immense challenges with that. And obviously, just like many lawyers, I find myself working at all different hours. And hey, if the baby is sleeping now, it's midnight, that's when I'm sending out my emails and I'm doing whatever it is that I need to do. And if I'm on a meeting and it's not necessarily a Zoom hearing with the court, I've got my co-counsel on my lap helping me out. So doing whatever I can to kind of manage all those different things. But I think also, with just like you said, with anything, whether you have children or not, having that work-life balance and being able to say, hey, I'm not going to be able to be as efficient and productive as I can if I don't stop and take some time for myself, even if it's only a few minutes. I try to meditate 10 minutes every day. I'll do a workout, here and there, as well as generally, when I take time off now, at this point in my career, I just try to take time off, even if it's only a few days and I'm on vacation. I turn off the phone, and if somebody else needs to handle it, they'll handle it. And earlier in my career, I rarely took time off, and I was always working extra, and I was at everybody's beck and call. But you tend to learn that the fires will put themselves out, or if they're not, you can put it out when you get back, right?
There you go. There you go. So I got to ask you, as we've asked everyone else, that creed. For you, what are those 3 or 4 words that you think you wake up thinking about as you work through your day and work through the challenges of working in the prosecutor's office, and as you do all the other stuff that you've talked about, working in the prisons and all of that? What is it that you hold tight to, or try to hold tight to be true to what it is, who it is you want to be?
So I think that the things that I think about are equity, um, respect, diligence, and transparency, right? I think that whenever I work with an attorney on a case, I try to be transparent. Hey, this is all the information I have. As soon as I know something and I can tell you, I tell you, and provide all the information. I'm not trying to hide the ball. I want us to be on the same page and to have a fair, playing field. So you're working from, the same information that I am. Equity in terms of looking at how I'm handling my cases, and even just thinking about, hey, the person that is before me may have a longer record, but unfortunately they may have also had other disadvantages that have brought them to this point, so that their record, even though it may look different than somebody else's, they're in a different position because of kind of the disadvantages they've already had, and what that means in terms of equity and respect in terms of what I kind of talked about before. Just treating every single person, be it witness, victim, attorney, defendant, that I come in contact with the respect, right? Just because somebody has a criminal case, it doesn't mean they're less than human, and they shouldn't be treated that way. And so I have always tried to, like I said, operate where no matter who I'm dealing with or who I'm talking to, that they know that I'm giving them respect and treating them fairly across the board. Because especially, unfortunately, a lot of times in our cases, one day somebody is a witness, and the next day they're a defendant or a victim, and it shouldn't matter who they are or what their role is in the system. They're still a human being.
That makes sense. So it's really wonderful, really wonderful. What an honor to talk to you. What an honor to have taught you, and what an honor to call you a colleague in this really a wonderful Massachusetts legal community. So thank you so very much. And I think we beat Meow.
No, my pleasure, and thank you.
You did a great job. You kept it rolling. It was great to hear your thoughts on things, Adrian. You're coming at it from a little different perspective, but it's so nice to hear your ethos and your creed. I enjoyed hearing everybody's creed. That's one of my favorite conversations. Questions that I've asked in conversations, and it was fun to hear that throughout the day. Great job, Margaret. We're so proud of all of your work on civil rights and restorative justice. You're doing just terrific things. So we appreciate you, and we're happy to call you our own. Adrian, for class of 2010, you really represented well, and it was fun to hear, all your hard work and what you're doing to balance home and work. You're doing a good job at that. I was happy to meet your baby once too in our prep calls. Thank you for that. These have been terrific conversations this morning. Thank you both. Thank you everybody that participated today. The next segment that we have is tonight, and those are the class specific Zooms. We started it off at 5 p.m. with the class of 75. So you can either go to bed afterwards, or Dan and Steve can go out partying afterwards. We don't know what they may want to do, but that starts at 5 p.m. You all will receive your Zoom links at 1 p.m. Eastern time for those tonight. We have some special guests. We have a U.S. Senator coming to one of the Zooms. We're very excited. That would only happen at Northeastern. I just have to say that. So lots of fun things happening tonight. They kick off at 5 p.m. with class 75 and the class of 80. And then they're staggered throughout the night. If you have questions, you know where to reach all of us. Great job this morning. I really enjoyed our talk with Senator Spilka and all of these conversations with. You're all doing great work, and you bring Northeastern with you where you go. And that's just so wonderful to hear. So thanks everyone for being with us for the second part of virtual reunions. We hope to see many of you tonight. A big round of applause for all of you. Good job. All right, we'll see you a little bit later today. Thanks for joining us last night and today.